Is well, doing well. Um, I'm gonna start. I'm gonna share the screen. We started. I was in the middle yesterday, last week. I had started a piece in the Rambam, which um, if it's a famous piece or not, but it's pretty well known. And as I said, the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah often at the end of each of the 14 books, he waxes a little bit poetic, and he talks about, even though it's a halacha book, the Mishnah Torah, he gives a little bit, he talks a little bit philosophy, hashkafa, musar, and he does it sometimes within the Mishnah Torah, and this is one of the places he does it. And I had started this. This is the last halacha in Hilchot Me'ilah. Hilchot Me'ilah, not Mila, circumcision, but Me'ilah with an ayin, which is to be Mo'el, there's a korban Me'ilah, which one has to bring if they accidentally utilize something which belongs to Hekdesh for their own personal use. So they bring a korban Me'ilah, and someone, whether it's done purposely or by accident, who is Mo'el behekdesh, uses something which is hekdesh for their own personal use. And the Rambam uses this as a springboard to say, if we have to be careful with physical items, which have the name of God associated with them, and that they are physical items which are hekdesh, so how much more so, certainly, we have to be careful with ideas, with mitzvot, which are associated with God, i.e., they came from God, mitzvos from God. How careful we have to be to not to mistreat them, not to make light of them, even if they're difficult to understand. And that's what he really talks about here. I have it in front of you, this halacha chet. We started it, but I started reading, Bo ure'eh, come and see, kama hichmira Torah, how careful the Torah was b'me'ilah, when it comes to me'ilah. Uma in eitzim va'avanim, he makes like a kal v'chomer, if when it comes to sticks and stones, ve'afar va'efer, kevan shenikra shem adon ha'olam aleihem b'dvarim bilvad, if the name of God is associated with them, nitkadeshu, they become holy. The chol hanoeg bahen minag chol, and anyone treats them in a regular fashion, ma'alba is mo'el, is transgressing. Vafilu haya shogeg, even if it's done by accident, sarich kapara, they need some kind of atonement. Kal v'chomer l'mitzvah shechakak lanu hakadosh baruch. I think I read this already. Certainly, so I don't want to take too much time reading it again. How much more so for a mitzvah which God taught us that the person shouldn't rebel, shouldn't kick them, even though they don't understand the reasons for them. And he says those are the chukim. We know the difference between mishpatim and chukim. Certainly mishpatim, and so we have respect for mishpatim because we understand them. We say, wow, this shows our enlightenment, this shows the advancement of our society, that we have laws going back thousands of years which legislate against theft, against things about which teach us to honor parents and teach us not to harm people's property and things like that. And we're proud of that. But when it comes to chukim, then a person, whether it's characterized as the umot ha'olam, whether it's characterized as the satan, whether it's characterized as the yetzer hara, libo shel adam nokfo, there's something either from without or within. A person sometimes has difficulty answering to themselves or to others. These things I don't really understand the reason for them. And if we don't understand the reason for them, the tendency is that a person can say, with not our tendency, some people can say, they're archaic rules for a society which no longer apply. a person can reject them and disregard them and leave them. Anything which doesn't become um, uh, which doesn't make sense to me. Someone once said to me, "Well, I believe in the ethics of religion, but I don't believe in religion. I don't believe in the other parts of religion." So I said, "Well, you believe in ethics then, not religion." But if we subjugate, if we recognize comes from God, so we understand, even if we don't understand them, we subject ourselves and to the will of God and to the laws of God, whether or not we understand them. And it's something where others can say and make fun and ridicule, but it's something where a person themselves in their own heart could say, well, I don't understand it. It goes against my sensibilities and it certainly doesn't make sense. So how do I deal with it? How do I reckon with it? And we've all, I think, had probably to struggle with it sometimes, whether it's explaining to others or explaining to ourselves. My daughter, was just home for, she's doing Sherut Le'umi in a place called Beit Ori in Afula for adults with special needs. And she works with people, mostly not religious people there, who are the workers there. There's a contingent of non-Jews who come to work there also, not just Arabs, but from Germany. So she said to me, so how do you explain, somebody asked me, they cook some food, and I said, I really can't eat it. I have to turn on the fire. How do I explain, Bishul Akum to them? That's a tough one, how to explain Bishul Akum. That's not something which is, it could make sense, but there it's something where, she said it was once, she said, well, I think, I told them it's, was once based upon the thing that maybe somebody would put stuff in which was not kosher, which is a politically correct answer. It's not really the correct answer. The correct answer is not something that we really want to share. To say, well, the reason I don't eat your cooking is so that I don't come to marry you, or my child doesn't come to marry your child, and therefore it sets a certain distance between us. That won't go over so well to explain it that way. So there are things which certainly things where the explanations are difficult, and there are things where we just don't have explanations for them, and how to answer them to ourselves and how to answer them to others is not always so simple. And he says, even David HaMelech, and look what he says. He says, "Hamishpatim are the mitzvos." Look what he says here. Hamishpatim hein mitzvot she'ta'aman galui. Mishpatim are ones we understand. Yisur gezel, shfichat damim, murder, kibbut av va'em. V'hachukim and chukim are mitzvot she'ein ta'amam yadua. And yet the Torah, Chachamim say, chukim chakti lecha. I made you chukim, en lecha reshut laharer b'hem. V'yitzro shel adam nokfo. And he says a person's yetzer, it sort of knocks at them. V'umot ha'olam ashivin aleihem. And people can say, this is stupid, silly stuff. You think you're smart. You're keeping to stupid, archaic laws. Think about what it is for, I'm sure people here have done it. You go to a secular university in the States, unfortunately, even in Israel, and you're confronted with all kinds. You take a young, I say a kid, 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and they have to start answering and thinking about things, and they have a day school education, a yeshiva education, and all of a sudden people are hitting them with all kinds of, does this make sense? Why do you do this? And, it's a separate issue whether our schools and our high schools prepare our kids to deal with this, how they're prepared to deal with it. But a lot of them are really hit with questions which they never really thought about, where they have to give answers to others and to themselves. And for the first time, they start thinking, does this really make sense? And I'm talking on the religious level. I'm not getting into a separate issue, things like Israel and having to answer for, all putting all kinds of our outlook regarding political issues. but I'm talking about religious issues here. It's not a simple thing to do. So it says, Yitzro shel Adam ve'umot ha'olam nokfim bam. And he says, V'kama haya David HaMelech mitzta'er. I think this is where I'd read up till here last week. David HaMelech is what, imagine, King David was mitzta'er min haminim. How much he suffered from the heretics. Umin ha'akum, and from the, David HaMelech was, dealt with all kinds of people. He was the king of Israel. And he was mitzta'er, shahayu meshivin ala chukim. The kol zman that they would ask questions and give him a hard time about the chukim. The kol zman shahayu rodfin oto b'tshvot hasheker she'orchin lefi kotzer da'at ha'adam, and all kinds of questions and tainas v'haya mosif. And what did he do, David HaMelech? David HaMelech used that. Sometimes a person is able to use difficult times, or to use I'm sorry, the word I'm looking for. When people come against them, they're able to use that to strengthen their own beliefs. And David HaMelech was able lahosif dveikut b'Torah. Shenema taflu alai sheker zedim ani b'chol lev etzor pikudecha. V'ne'emar sham b'nyan kol mitzvotecha emunah sheker ridafuni azarani. Even though they pursued me with sheker and with attacks, they were able to use this. He was able to use this kind of hitnagdut against him and against the laws of the Torah to draw himself closer and become firmer and stronger in his beliefs and his love to God. And this is what the Rambam is talking about, and the difficulty of, and the importance, what he learns from Me'ilah to the laws of the Torah. Now he says something very interesting. I want to just finish this and then expand a little bit. And here he says something very interesting. All of the karbanot fall under the categories of chukim that we don't really understand. Amru chachamim shebishvil avodat karbanot olam omed. It's one of the Amdei HaOlam, al Torah, al Ha'avodah, al Gemilut Chasadim. Shebe'asiyat HaChukim HaMishpatim, through performing the Chukim and the Mishpatim, Zochim HaYesharim L'chayei Olam Haba, we merit the Olam Haba. V'ktima Torah tzivui al HaChukim, shene'emar U'shmartem et Chukotai, ve'et Mishpatai asher ya'aseh otam ha'adam v'chai b'hem. And it even puts the Chukim before the Mishpatim. There's a lesson in chukim, whether or not we understand or we try to understand, but we can't fully understand the chukim. But there's a lesson in having laws that we can't understand, and that teaches us a certain surrender to the laws of God. Now, I want to talk about this, but I first want to say it's interesting. The Rambam says here himself that all the karbanot are chukim, which we really can't understand. Now, you may be familiar with, and I think we may even have talked about one time in this class, but I'm sure you've heard it before. There's a very famous opinion of the Rambam, which is often quoted in the Moreh Nevuchim, where he talks about the korbanot and the reasons for the korbanot. And at the beginning of the book of Vayikra, the Ramban brings down what the Rambam says. He rejects what the Rambam says, but what the Rambam says, he talks about the korbanot being a means to two things, he says. One is it's to wean a person, to wean the nation away from idolatry. And that the sacrifices was something which was ingrained in society, ingrained in the culture of the world. And to wean people away from it and bring it to Avodat Hashem, there was, that God commanded us to bring korbanot. The other idea, which is similar, which the second thing which the Rambam says, is that since these were the god animals which were worshipped by the Egyptians, to break them from the culture of the Egyptians, They were told to bring as korbanot the seh, which were deified by the Egyptians. They were told to bring them as korbanot. The common denominator in what the Rambam is saying there, which the Ramban and others just have difficulty with, is that it seems that the korbanot is just something which removes us from a negative. That the idea of korbanot being something, a positive way of serving God, it doesn't come through so much in the explanation of the Rambam. The Rambam saying it was somehow meant to bring humanity, away from certain things. Based upon that, there are those who take the Rambam. I don't think the Rambam is saying this, but take the Rambam to all different places. That in the future, they want to say that the Rambam would hold that there won't be korbanot in the future. Again, I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe that's correct. The Rambam says in Mishnah Torah clearly that the Mashiach comes, they will return to all the mitzvot and to the korbanot. And the Rambam here himself says that all the korbanot are chukim, and that doesn't contradict what the Rambam does in the Moreh Nevuchim. The Rambam tries to give reasons, and this is, others explain this. They try to reconcile. They ask many questions on the Rambam. There were korbanot brought by people, humanity. Hevel and Cain brought korbanot. Noach brought a korban when he exited the Teva. This was before the Egyptians. This was before weaning people from anything. It seems difficult to say that the only idea behind the korbanot is weaning a person from a negative. And therefore, I think that the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim is explaining things on a certain level. And he understood, and he says it clearly here, that there's more to the korbanot than what he said. It doesn't take away from what he's saying at all. He's saying, here's an explanation for the korbanot. Is this the depth of God's meaning behind the korbanot? No, he's not. I don't believe he's saying that. Or anybody necessarily when they say ta'amei ha-mitzvot. Interesting that we say ta'amei ha-mitzvot. We use ta'am as a taste. It gives us, even many mitzvot we can understand to some degree. Even mishpatim we can understand to some degree. But there are perhaps ideas behind them, deeper ideas, which we may not be attuned to, which go further and go into other areas which we may not be attuned to. Just to think, I guess what the Rambam is saying here regarding chukim can apply to some extent to mishpatim as well. We have to have a healthy humility and say, yes, we believe we're supposed to understand as much as we can. And even, we do the Ramban also, the Ramban tries also to give he understands the korbanot after he rejects the Rambam. If anyone wants to look at it, it's the beginning of the book of Vayikra. The Ram is a long discussion in the Ramban where he quotes the Rambam and he gives his own ideas. It's in other places also. You can find, I'm sure, many writings. It's a major topic. This opinion of the Rambam in general, which he doesn't say here, is brought in many places. The Ramban sees it as bringing ourselves almost, that when we bring a korban, it's as if we're saying, we're placing our hands on the head of the animal. And we're saying as if we should be in place. It's like we want to take our actions, our thoughts, our machshavot, and putting it all to serve God in a positive way. So the Ramban sees it again as different, but whether you're the Rambam or the Ramban, I think what he's saying here is super valuable. And that is, they're all chukim. The korbanot fall into the category of we don't really understand. Lo machshavotay machshavotechem, v'lo darchechem derachai. We have to have a humility to understand that everything, that God's intellect is above ours. Rav Stavsky discusses the topic of surrender in service of God. It's very interesting that we sometimes have to surrender. And he doesn't exactly say this, but you have to surrender sometimes physically, that, I can't do this. I want to eat this. It smells good. I'm sure it's good, but I can't. I have to deny myself physically. Sometimes emotionally, we have to do things which emotionally it hurts us, and it's hard, a difficult emotional thing to do. And sometimes intellectually, we have to say, I'm smart and I understand things, but I surrender my logic to the logic of the Ribono Shel Olam. And that's the idea of to recognize that it's above us and beyond us. I once saw it said about this Rambam. It's interesting. It's a cute thing. I don't know if it's really, the Rambam the Mishnah Torah is made up of 14 books. Hilchos Ne'ilah is in Sefer Kodshim, which is the 8th book, which is the 8th of the 14 books of Mishnah Torah. This halacha is in Perek Chet, which is the 8th Perek, and this is halacha Chet. It's the 8th book of Mishnah Torah, the 8th chapter, and the 8th halacha. It's a cute thing. I don't, take it or leave this if you want. But 8 symbolizes lema'ala min hateva. It's beyond nature. It's beyond our understanding. And that's what's being conveyed here by the Rambam. This idea that there are things, whether it's the mitzvot, the chukim, which are beyond our understanding.
Or Brit Milah, which we were blessed with this week, which is emotionally, thank you, emotionally surrendering yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no question. As you watch the women's section at a Brit Milah is a little. Also the men. Nogea b'davar. It's just like a mini Akedat Yitzchak. It's emotionally surrendering ourselves to God. There's no question about it. With all the medical literature about the benefits of, it's a tough one. Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Wow. All right. Beautiful. Wow. But that's a beautiful idea. And Brit Milah is
8th day.
Certainly the 8th day. And it's been said, it's not that, that it relates to this being, even in terms of the Brit Milah, of what it symbolizes, and the part of the body which is involved. It involves our overcoming our teva, and making more of it. There's the whole idea of if God creates something, isn't God's creation perfect? God wants us to perfect His creation. He gave us Asher bara Elokim la'asot. Yes, you did.
You brought something up in my head right now about even emotionally we have to give ourselves over, and I was thinking how difficult it has been for people in this tkufa, the shivas that are on Zoom, the funerals that don't take place except for a very small amount of people. We know psychologically that you need to grieve and you need people around you. And Shiva, with my mother, I had a very short Shiva because of Yontif and everything. And I kept thinking, I need more, I need to talk more. And I think we have to be extremely understanding of people through this tkufa who we haven't been able to be at funerals, lo aleinu, or Shivas, or it's been extremely hard for them emotionally. And but that's what the hour calls for. And then sometimes you'll have somebody that their parent, let's say, God forbid, dies, and it's an hour before Pesach or whatever, and that's it. That was your Shiva. Yontif now takes over. And it's very hard for us to give ourselves over those things, but that's the halacha.
Certainly I would agree. People talk about, the weddings, the bar mitzvahs, the bat mitzvahs, and I've said it, and I'm sure we've all thought about it. It's the saddest is the the Levayos and the Shiva and the Kavod Achron of people who lived lives and what can you say, deserved more than 15 people at the burial, but this is the way, and it's a surrender in a way, and it really is a lesson. I mean, it's not easy for people, and but the lesson that we teach our children, I think, by surrendering is such a powerful lesson. I speak to parents all the time, and I'm sure we've said it to our kids or grandkids. The lessons there. There's no question that in terms of the schools and academic, as good as the schools are doing, it's not the same. And there are going to be gaps, and there are things which are being missed out. On the other hand, the opportunity for education that parents are giving their children now, how to deal and how to sometimes surrender and sometimes and deal with this in this kind of situation is invaluable. It's a tremendous chinuch, I think, that people have an opportunity to give to their children.
Can I make a commercial break?
Go ahead.
This past week, I have 4 grandchildren in Orot Zion. This past week, the kids got their Tudot. The school, even though it was raining and cold, all the teachers went out, hand-delivered the Tudot. I don't think kids will ever forget that. They hand-delivered the Tudot to all the kids, took pictures with the kids so that it would still be a very meaningful day. And I thought that was me'al u'me'ever, speaking about me'al u'me'ever on the part of the staff. And I want all of us to know that is coming from the school that we're all, in our way, attending.
It was from the girls only.
Yeah, they did that with the girl. That was
I still think it's a great school.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
I'm not taking away from it, but I think my grandson would have liked it too.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe they'll hopefully by the next report cards they won't have to take that idea. But I know all of the schools, Orot Zion and the other schools, we're part of a wonderful Marechet Chinuch here in Efrat, are really trying to be creative and try to think how to deal with this. I would just say when it comes, and then I want to move on to something else, this surrender, and I don't want to belabor it because I think I once spoke about this before. Rav Stavsky speaks about a case that took place in Boston, a beautiful story where a young man, Jewish man, met a young woman who was not Jewish, and they became close, and she wanted to learn about Judaism, and she did, and she learned, and they both learned about Judaism and became closer, and she converted to Judaism, and they both became close and connected to religion and Judaism, and they decided they were going to get married. Before the wedding, he took her to the cemetery where his ancestors were buried, his grandparents or great-grandparents, and they came back from the cemetery and they saw a symbol on the graves, and they didn't know what the symbol was. The symbol that they saw was outstretched hands, and they discovered that he was a Kohen. And a Kohen, it's the halacha, the Kohen cannot marry the Gioret. A Kohen can't marry a Giores, a convert. And this beautiful, heartwarming story turned into something almost tragic. And they looked, and he writes, Rabbi Stavsky, I have to find where he spoke about this case. He said, we tried everything, every kind of heter to find that he's not really a Kohen, to passel the kahuna. He says, we tried, but at some point we couldn't in this case. And they walked away from each other, and they cried, and we cried, and everybody cried. if that's not surrender, what is, surrender? That you have what should be a beautiful story, but you say, this is the halacha, it's hurtful, it's painful, it doesn't make sense, maybe, to us. Why should, how could, come on. But that's sometimes, that's an emotional surrender where we sometimes have to surrender. And that's, I think, the idea as well. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something else in the Rambam. It relates to this a little bit, but it's a very famous piece in the Rambam, which I think gives an insight into human nature and into the development of our religion as well. The Rambam, in the first of the books of Mishnah Torah, it's called Sefer Mada, the book of science, so to speak. And it's broken up into 5 different sections of halacha, Yesodei HaTorah, the basics of the Torah, Hilchot Deot, the laws of characteristics of people, where the Rambam talks about a lot of the same ideas which we learned about in the Rambam's Shmona Prakim, his introduction to Masechet Avot. A lot of the same ideas. There's more there as well, but he talks about them. There's Hilchot Talmud Torah, the laws of Talmud Torah. There's Hilchot Avodah Zarah, the laws of idolatry, and Hilchot Shuvah, the laws of repentance. Those 5 sets of halachot make up the first book in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah Yad HaChazakah. In the laws of Avodah Zarah, at the beginning of the laws of Avodah Zarah, the Rambam gives an introduction and talks about the development of Avodah Zarah. We have to remember that the world was created, the natural state of the world should be, and God willing we pray for it, when humanity, the created, recognize the creator, that there is a creator. We recognize we're the created, we understand that there is a God. That's the natural state, that's the perfect state of the world, where the humanity recognizes that there's a Ribono Shel Olam, all of humanity. Somehow mankind strayed from that. And the Rambam gives a little bit of a history of how that took place. And let me just get to this 1 second. The Rambam, in the beginning of Hilchos Avodah Zarah, it's the first chapter of Hilchos Avodah Zarah. He speaks about the history of it. Can you see the screen? Okay. He says, Bimei Enosh, in the days of Enosh, who was one of the grandsons of Adam, Ta'u b'nei ha'adam, people began and made a mistake. What was the mistake? They made Ta'u b'nei Adam ta'ut gadol. They made a big mistake. V'nivara atzat chakmei oto hador. And those people they took an idea. V'enosh atzmo min ha'toim. And Enosh himself, who was from the progeny of Adam, made the mistake as well. V'zu ha'ita ta'otam. And this was their mistake. Look what he says. Amru, they said, Ho'il, since, v'ha'elokim bara kochavim elu. And God created these stars, the Galgalim, and these, the Galgalim, the various atmospheres and the various constellations, lahaniget ha'olam, to that, not that they really, that in their God, it doesn't mean lahanhik, that they decide how to take care of or rule the world. But God's will, the Rambam says this in other places, God's will, which is, God is completely not physical, and his will gets into this physical world through the Rambam explains or sees it, take it or leave it, making its way through the heavenly constellations. That's where it goes from something which is completely ruchani to this world, which is a physical world. Hence, you look up to the stars and you read the stars, see what's going to be. Because it's coming down through them. Since God set it up that way, Natanam b'marom, and God put them up in the sky, v'chalak lehem kavod, v'hem hashamashim hamishamshim lefanav, and they serve God. Re'uyin hem l'shabacham u'lefa'aram. It's only right that we should praise them. V'lchalok lahem kavod. V'zehu ratzon hakel baruch hu. And this is the will of God, legadel ulechabed mi shegidalo v'kibdo, to that we should give honor to those who God put in a position of authority, so to speak. Kemosha hamelech, just like if there's a king, rotzeh lechabed ha'omdim lefanav. V'zehu kvodo shel melech. This is a way of serving God. Okay? Now, Kevan she'ala davar zeh. So the beginnings of Avodah Zarah, according to the Rambam, it's fascinating what he says, came from an earnest desire to serve God. And people logically saw this as a way, well, if I'm supposed to serve God, if I'm supposed to serve the king, so shouldn't I give honor to the governors, to the mayor? He's sort of a shaliach of the king. He's under him. So it's a way of honoring the king is to honor his underlings. And therefore, they started to build temples to the stars. And they saw this, what's interesting, as a way of serving God. Not that they said that this is God, all right? They didn't see it that way. They just saw this as a way of serving God. That was step one. The achar came, the achar she'orchu hayamim, and then afterwards it developed. But it started from a sincere desire to serve God. And therefore, they said this is a way of serving God. And from that came where there were people Nevi'ei Sheker. The next step was that people started saying, Shehakel tziva, that God commanded, the Amar lahem, ivdu kochav ploni, o kochavim, serve these stars, or serve this, the sun or the moon. V'ikrivulo. So that was the next step. They said, not just it's our idea, but God commanded. That was the next step that they started doing. And then he goes on, I'm skipping a little bit, and the v'itchilu kozvim acherim, and then other liars came and said, shel kochav atzmo, o hagalgal, o hamalach diber imahem, or the kochav and the galgal, they said, worship me. The amar lahem ivduni bekach v'kach, v'hodia lahem, that was the next step. So it started out, this is a nice thing to do. This makes sense. They used their logic to say, this is a good thing to do. And then the next step was that Nevi'im started saying, God said this. And then the next step was they themselves said, the star said, the sun said, serve me. And they began, therefore, to serve all these things, and l'hishtachavot. Then this is the way they should now serve. And it came to that, and that was until they got to a point where they just forgot God. Aval tzur, and they began to serve this. Aval tzur ha'olamim lo haya shum adam shaya makiro. V'lo yad'u ela yichidim ba'olam, kigon Chanoch and Metushelach v'Noach v'Shem v'Ever, until things sort of flipped and switched, and the natural order was gone that people recognized as a God, and people were moved to now serve something that was not God, beginning with this is a way of serving God, and then getting to a person where God was completely forgotten from the picture. And this is very interesting, and I think it's instructive in a number of ways what the Rambam is telling us. There are, the idea that Avodah Zarah is mentioned so much, and it's far from us. Idolatry, is this something that we have an urge for? Is this something which affects our generation of people? But clearly it affected historically the idea of idolatry, and how it affected, and how it developed, and how careful we have to be of not creating the whole thing of graven images and things to keep us very far away from Avodah Zarah, because man has a natural tendency to aspire or to want to connect with something greater than themselves. I had a friend in yeshiva, I don't know if you believe this or not. He said, the idea of people are so into sports teams. Sports is a big deal, maybe more by men. I'm sorry, a little sexist than by women, but sports, the Giants or the Yankees, or people live here in Israel 20 years and they're still going crazy because the Giants are not getting anywhere. And and this friend of mine said, again, take it or leave it. I don't know if it's true, but that this also stems from a basic human need to connect with something greater than ourselves. And there's this team and players, and I'm somehow, and I wear a Giants jersey or a Yankees jersey, so that makes me, I sort of connect with something greater than myself. But there is no doubt that connecting with something greater is something part of who we are, and connecting with God, and the danger of it slipping to somewhere else, to something negative, is something which is, the Rambam is saying here also how it started. It's fascinating what the Rambam is saying, that the Avodah Zarah didn't begin with a rebellion. It began with an intent to serve God, and it just moved. It got to a place where it moved away from serving God. It's interesting because we have in our Masorah also, ways which this can happen. There's a tefillah which we say at Slichos, which maybe you're familiar with. It starts Machnise Rachamim, then popularize it into very I don't know whose song it is. Machnise Rachamim, da 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 da. Beautiful tune. Machnise Rachamim, Hachnisu Tfilaseinu. I think I even brought it up here. I don't know if I could show it to you. The Tefillah Machnise Rachamim. Machnise Rachamim, here is on the side. Machnise Rachamim, Machnisu Rachamenu Lifnei Barachamim. We're turning to the angels. Mashmi'ei Tefillah. Hashmi'u tfilasenu lifnei shomei tefillah. Mashmi'ei tza'aka. Hashmi'u tza'akatenu lifnei shomei tefillah. Hachnisu lifnei melech misratze. Hishtadlu ba. We're turning to the angels to pray on our behalf. Now, this prayer, I don't know if you are, can you see? Is the screen sharing working? It says it's paused.
No, we can't see what you're talking, but we're listening.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. It's saying. Well, I don't know why it's resume share. Okay. So this can you see it now?
No. We've got the windows and a little square and an X in the big, but I don't see anything else.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. B2.
All right.
I don't know.
It says
really.
I'm doing screen share, but it's not happening now.
All
right, you can, the song. This was a tremendously, now this goes back, this Tefillah Machnise Rachamim is mentioned in the writings of the Gaonim. It's a very old piyut in the writings of the Gaonim, but it was very controversial. And there are those who felt it's a very bad thing to say. And the reason was because it can lead a person to thinking that they're davening to the angels. And you start, I'm just asking the angels to intercede. There are those people who still today don't say this tefillah. It's in the Slichos, Machnise Rachamim. But because it can lead a person to believe that, or to move away, to think that the Malachim interceding is very important. And to turn to the Malachim. And even going to daven at the Beit Kvarot, it's a place where the Neshama, but we ask, all right, we say at Lo Aleinu at a funeral, this person should be a Melitz Yosher and all that. But not to forget that it's always God, and it's not intermediaries. And he brings down here, if you look it up, I'm sorry, it's not, the screen sharing is not working, but he brings down here, there are Chazal which make it so clear that God is the one we daven to, and we have to be so careful that it doesn't turn into worship of a person. Now, I'm not getting, political, and I wanted to say, I was talking to my son I was talking to him, he's in yeshiva, but it was interesting to me that a big deal is made about Atzmot Yosef, that Moshe went and he took the bones of Yosef and he troubled himself to bring the bones of Yosef. Say, what's the big deal about Atzmot? You'd think it's something in the Medrash, that he brought the bones of Yosef to Eretz Yisrael. Why is this? There's a pasuk right away that Moshe went and he said, I'm going to do this. He went and in the middle, he's bringing the whole nation. He's in charge of the whole business there. And he's going to take the bones of Yosef, to take them out of Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. Why is such a big deal, man? And the question is on Yosef. Yosef, before he dies, he says, God's going to remember you, take my bones. Promise, you're going to promise, it was a big deal to Yosef, it was a big deal to Moshe, and I was talking to my son, and then, is it telling you an idea that we have to remove every vestige when we make Aliyah, when we have to, we bring it all up with us, and then it hit me, over Shabbos, it hit me what it is. You'll forgive me. I hope I don't want to insult anybody, but I think that maybe Yosef was afraid that if they leave his bones in Mitzrayim, every year the Jews are going to leave Israel on Rosh Hashanah to go to Mitzrayim, and maybe that's why he didn't want to leave his bones.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I hope I'm not. Please don't write letters. There's nothing. I've heard it's a very inspirational experience for people who go to Uman. So if you go to Uman and your children go to Uman, they should go and be well and have a wonderful experience. But to me, it's like we have to be, I think the lesson of this Avodah Zarah, of what he's saying here, is that we have to be very, very careful. Leaders are leaders, and people to daven for us, and people who are great people are great people. But it could but the idea that these things could pull us away from the fact that Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad, there's one God, v'lo ra'ui lehitpalel. It's ra'ui to hitpalel to Him, to daven to Him. He is the decider of all. I think this is the point that the Rambam saying. There's more in this Rambam which I want to get to. Be'ezrat Hashem, I'll get to hopefully next week. But I think this is one of the points in the Rambam which we find here.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say something. I never understood Avodah Zarah until I went to Thailand.
Thanks so much.
And then you saw people literally bowing to pestels and buying flowers, and it was unbelievable. I never understood I never understood what Avodah Zarah was until you actually, they bowed to every pestle, every block.
Yeah, it's very hard for us to relate to. You're right, but you see it there that there are still millions of people, probably billions
of people buying flowers every day to give to their pestle and bow down to them and pray, and it's unbelievable.
Yeah. We have
where was the
flowers?
Maybe we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it next time. Maybe we have our own challenges. Maybe Avodah Zarah takes on different meanings for us.
I know.
I see Reb Ruvain. I'll say goodbye. Everyone, good week. Stay healthy. Stay well.
Thank you.
If I can't get out, if someone could throw me out, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you. I'm out of here.
Hillary, if you can put me back in, I can't go on the computer. I can only go on the phone, which is very annoying for me.
Hi, everyone. I'll give you 5. Okay, take 5. Bathroom, coffee.
Good. I need it.
I made you the host. Now maybe you can say, I removed Chava earlier because she was stuck and now she can't get back in again. Any
Was
idea
she
what
a
I can do
bad
for her?
girl? Was she a bad girl that you removed her?
No, she's amazing. I would never do that to her. Now she's on her phone.
I am
but
not the
she wants to
host.
be on the computer.
I am not the host.
You're the host. I just made you the host. How
No,
does it make Hannah Lewis the
and
host?
Hannah
Oh,
Lewis is
no,
the
no,
host.
no, no, no. Hannah, are you there? Hannah? She's lost.
Mute.
Oh, I just did it to you.
Anything about chat.
I know, it always happens to you. You see where it says Reuven Rosenstock on the list of participants? Go where it
Open
says
up
participants
participants.
down below. This is the worst thing. Can you see where it says participants down below? Click on it. Oh dear. Hannah? She's muted for some strange reason.
She keeps muting herself.
Well, I didn't do that. I'll try.
Okay,
I can't
ask
unmute
her.
her now. Okay, Hannah, do you see where it says participants down the bottom?
I pressed and I have a whole list.
Okay, can you see where it says in Hebrew Reuven Rosenstock?
I'll go down.
Mine, it's at the beginning. He's not muted. It should be at the top. It should be one of the first.
Oh, yeah. 1 minute. I do.
Okay.
1
Now,
minute. One. Yeah. What do I do?
right click on it or click on it. I don't remember. I never remember.
Just put your mouse on top of me and you should see the word more, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so click on the
more.
more.
Okay, I did more. Now what?
One of the things
Now
says make host.
Okay. Do you want to change the host? Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
it worked.
I am the host.
Well, well done.
Hooray.
Hey.
Okay, Rav Reuven, as a class, we have a she'ela, nothing to do with Shabbat. You know the mugs we
I'm
made?
not answering.
Yes,
I'm
you
not
are.
answering.
It's a question. It's a halachic question. You're there for us, okay?
Go ahead. I'm just kidding. I'm just fooling around.
I think we have to close this Zoom and reopen it again because Bracha says I removed her. I did not remove you, Bracha. And somebody and Chava did the same thing, and now she can't get in. Can we close and open or something?
What, everybody go out and everybody come back in?
Something? No, you have to close, end it, and then restart it, I think. Because there's something very wrong. Everybody's disappearing out of it. That isn't the question, by the way. You want to do that?
I could do that. Let's everybody go out and everybody come back in.
No, you end the meeting and start it again.
I understand. But am I starting it as the host? If I open it up, I'm the host?
Well, if you do it quick, yeah. Or whoever's
Okay.
not will be, I don't know, because there's 2 or 3 people now who can't get in and I don't know why.
Is there allow a participant, enable waiting room?
No, we don't want that.
No, that's not that.
Is there anyone in the waiting room? I don't know why they can't
No,
get in.
no one's in
again.
the waiting room. No one. No one's in the waiting room.
Can you
Okay, end it and then start again?
try it?
Okay. And meeting for all.